guys know who we are. We are two HR ladies braving the world of everything right now with the coronavirus and holy moly. So my name is Brenda Neckbottle, and my clients commonly refer to me as the HR force of nature. I'm pretty stoked. And to my left, we are that way, is a really awesome lady. Her name is Suzanne Lucas, and she is known as the evil HR lady.
Brenda's the good witch and I'm the bad witch. Is that how it works out?
Like bad cop, good cop?
The problem is we're both actually nice.
That's true. I'll buy that one. I'll buy that one. So what we do here is that we talk about all sorts of really cool things, all HR. And these are real-time issues that are coming into play. Look, you already got me crying. I already got, oh my word.
No crying. There's no crying in soccer, which is what we're going to talk about.
There's no crying in baseball.
We're not talking about baseball, though. We're talking about soccer.
Baseball fan. And for somebody who lives in Virginia, I like Houston. So anyway, but we are here talking about some pretty cool stuff, and I really love what you came up with. So just so you guys know that we are YouTube living as we speak right now. We're excited about this. We do this every week, every Tuesday at 9 a.m. Whether we know the password or not, whether we're excited or not, we're here. We're doing it. So you guys are welcome to also put comments and questions that you have, as you're watching through, and I'll keep an eye out, see what kind of conversation we can drop. But anyway, so go ahead. I'm dying to get into this.
Okay, so as I said, there's no crying in soccer. That's what we're going to talk about today, which is kind of funny because I am the least sports fan in the world. I simply do not care about sports. And I live in Europe, where soccer, which they call football here, is the most important thing in the universe to everybody around me. And I don't like it. But I am an HR total nerd. And I am an employment law nerd. And so in the US, we have a men's national team and a women's national team. And the women's national team is a much better team. Now, by better, I don't mean that if they went head to head that the women would win. The women would lose miserably if they played against the men. But in the world scheme, women against women, they won the World Cup last year. They have a better following. People know who they are. The players, people know their names. And by people, I mean not me, but people that follow sports. They know their names. And the women's team sued because they said that there's two things. One is that they sued under the Equal Pay Act, saying that they did not get paid as much as the men and that is illegal. And then they sued under the Title VII of the Civil Rights Code, which is just general gender discrimination is what they're suing for here. And it went to court, and everybody was thinking that the women would win because their total end of the year paycheck, whatever was on their W-2s, was a heck of a lot less than what was on the men. So clearly they're winning a higher percentage of their games. They're winning the World Cup. The men didn't even qualify for the World Cup. And so they thought that they would win. Well, the judge allowed the civil rights portion to go forward, but he tossed out their equal pay. And there's lots of good reasons for that. So it turns out that the men play a lot more games than the women play. And if you break it down to a per game average, the men make less than the women do. So the women are making more money per game than the men do. And the other big thing is that this is a contract situation. Most US employees are at-will employees. There's no contract. You can discuss verbally or whatever what your pay is going to be. This is a contract situation that had lawyers sitting down and negotiating all of these things. And the women were offered the same contract as the men, and they rejected it for a much different contract. And the contract that they took had a lot of safety guarantees in it. For instance, the men, if they get injured, that's just it, they're done.
Yeah.
And the women negotiated that they would get paid while they were recovering from their injuries. The women negotiated that there would be a minimum number of players. The men don't have this. The women get retirement benefits. The men don't have it. The women have better health care than the men have. There's a whole bunch of stuff that they negotiated that the men didn't negotiate. And if they had had a rotten season and had lost all their games, they would have come out far ahead. But because they were good, they're arguing that they should be paid all the bonuses that the men get for good performance in a game. So that's what the situation is. And the judge said, no, sorry, you can't come back and say, hey, this isn't fair. You made your choice.
I like it. I mean, we hear so much in just mainstream media about pay disparity, and this is a really good example of what happens if you are not on top of your. I'm going to be punny. I'm sorry, when you're not on top of your game. As it pertains to this, but this isn't. I think we've got an opportunity to demystify some pay disparity here today, and that's what we wanted to talk about.
Yeah, because I think the media is so wrapped up in, they call it the gender pay gap, and they say, last year, I don't know what this year's is, but last year equal pay day was April 19th. And they say women have to work all the way through April to earn as much as men did the previous year. And those numbers don't tell the whole story. And just like with this court case, if you've, without looking into it, you say, hey, wait, why are the men making more money when the women are clearly better in their field? Field. That's what
funny. You're funny.
Oh, that's about my extent of my sports knowledge. They play on a field. Who plays on a pitch?
Isn't it a pitch is polo?
I don't know. Polo is definitely a sport that I know nothing about other than like Prince Harry on his horse.
We won't discuss that today. That'll turn this conversation like totally off of it.
That's right. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on behind the scenes. And I think the really critical part in this particular case is that the women were given the same contract as the men and they rejected it. And now they're turning around and saying, hey, wait, we shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
We should have picked this better contract. But it's all about safety and security. And, clearly with some of the things that they included, like injury pay.
Yeah.
That's something that I would say that's a very smart thing. And, I wonder if there are male soccer players out there that were on the men's national team that are now destitute because they got injured, couldn't continue playing, and had no backup, no severance, no injury pay or whatever. But taking risks, the higher pay risk can pay off, and it can also go terribly.
Yeah, absolutely it can. I mean, when you first told me about this, and we started talking about, planning for today, and like, what are we going to talk about? Immediately when I heard what you were talking about is that there was what seemed to be like a theme of entitlement. And that's a challenge.
Yeah, I fully agree that they felt like, hey, we can take this sure thing, and we did, and now we don't like it. We're entitled to the risk-based one because we would have gotten the rewards.
Yeah. And that is one of those agendas that then when you smell it, you know it's there. You may not have a name for it, you may not have context for it, but that's one of those things. It's like, you know it when you see it. But that's what happens with agendas. If you don't think through these things carefully as either a practitioner or as just an individual, if you're watching this in your in the professional field of any kind, and you're working on negotiating your salary, the thing is that what seems great in one hand later on may not necessarily seem enough. But companies are only capable of doing yet so much.
Right. And the thing is that they are operating without full knowledge either in a lot of these situations. I mean, if you think of people in sales positions right now that nothing is selling, um, except food, um, that they may have thought, they may have been able to look at the market before and say this is a great deal, and now the salespeople aren't getting anything.
Right.
And that's not because the salespeople were naive, and it's not because the businesses were like, haha, I know I can bring you on a commission only job and you won't get anything for 3 months. um, Nobody knew this was coming. And so the risk and reward things don't always mean you're going to get the reward side of things.
Exactly. And that's where that entitlement comes in. And that's a really big deal when when you're putting yourself out there as an individual in the workplace. And I guarantee you, even though, look, I mean, this soccer league has done some pretty amazing things. They've had some outrageous successes over the last 2 years, and they're doing great. The problem is that on top of some of their already poor publicity that they've received, and some of and what is perceived an actual bad behavior that has been demonstrated. But what's happening is that this is like throwing a rotten egg in a barrel of ripe apples. And you got to remember that when you try and get more than what you're entitled to, that looks really negatively upon you, to the point where people, quite frankly, now question your character, and that's not a position you want to be in.
Yeah, it's not. And it's interesting to me how some people's reactions are the complete opposite of ours here. My friend Kate Bishop, who is a wonderful person, I love her, I trust her. She 100% disagrees with me, and she gave this example on LinkedIn. It said Jane and Jim are salespeople. Jane makes $40,000 base plus 10% commissions. She sold $3 million and earned $340,000. Jim makes 20% commissions only. He sold 1 million and earned $200,000. Does Jane have an Equal Pay Claim Act? And she believes that he does because the end salaries were so different. And I say, no, she doesn't, unless she asked for the same deal that Jim got and they said, no, you have to take this other one. If they were both offered this, I could see me making the same mistake Jane makes of like, well, gosh, the 40,000 is guaranteed no matter what. So let me take that one and then see how it goes. Whereas Jim's like, hey, I'm willing to try for the straight commission thing. It's a risk. It's a risk. And if she had done terribly, she would have come out ahead. But she didn't do terribly. But she doesn't know going into a new job. Nobody knows going into a new job when you're talking about this kind of commission-based things, which is essentially what the soccer team did. I mean, they're not selling anything. Well, they're selling tickets, but it's if you win or lose the game, you can guess how you're going to do, but you don't know up
Yeah.
until the score is finished.
Right, exactly. And then just because you've been successful doesn't mean that you can go back and renegotiate the past. You can only negotiate moving forward.
Yeah, and one of the things that I would be really interested to see is how the next contract with the US women's national team is.
Right.
Because if they are willing to take the men's contract, then, more power to you, sister. Take that. I bet they won't, because they won't want to give up the security that they have built into their contract. The one thing that their contract covers that the men's doesn't need is a pregnancy leave. And
It would be a miracle if it did.
yeah, it would be very different. But the injury clause, the retirement program, the severance, the minimum number of players, all of these things, are they willing to give those up?
Right. And then just because they get the contract they want doesn't guarantee a good season, or it doesn't guarantee any positive outcome just because they had a good past.
Right. And we can hope that it does, and we can make guesses. Um, you know, I know how much money I made last year, and I'm estimating my expenses this year based on what I made last year, so that, my budgeting or whatever. But I could do a lot better and I could do a lot worse because my pay is very flexible, depending on what I'm doing. Those are risks that I'm willing to take. Um, would it be nice to have a corporate job again? Yeah, I would like to have a regular paycheck. But on the other hand, sometimes when I get a viral article, I rake it in, you
Yeah.
know, and whereas if I had a corporate job, I'd just get the same paycheck.
Right, exactly. And still, I mean, there's a lot of benefits that come with not just like the actual benefits of the position, but I mean, there's intrinsic benefits that come with having that level of stability. I mean, when I worked with ADP, that was my favorite job I ever held. Favorite job I ever held. It was like I hit my dream job. I was traveling, I was, meeting all sorts of amazing people, studying all kinds of different businesses. I mean, at that time, in 5 years, I had consulted to over 350 companies. And
Wow.
that's huge. Yeah. And that was just the nature of what I did, And then I didn't stop. I continued to moonlight and kept consulting to, a wide variety of different companies and different, levels while I was, back in the seat. I was just moonlighting at that point. And, but it was really awesome to be able to see everything. I mean, I've seen a lot of different things done a lot of different ways. And I know we kind of went left on this, but where I'm getting to is that there are days where I miss being able to log on to ADP's system and book my flight easily. I miss, being able to shop for what hotel I'm going at and, what area of the city where I have to travel, and being able to explore that as a side effect of, my responsibilities. Those are, to me, are some of the cool perks, right? And I love to travel, and I love to fly, and I love all of it. That's just how I am. That's just how I'm wired. But it also comes with a price too. And that was with that particular job, the career path didn't go beyond what I was doing for me to stay active in the field of HR. I was always going to be, repetitively doing the same kind of thing. Now what I'm doing is way beyond. I mean, this really is, I'm really doing what I enjoy doing and really, focusing in and honing it in. But even when I got that job, I should have negotiated a little bit differently. And I think that women in general don't necessarily they're not the best when it comes to advocating and negotiating for their positions. And I think that is one of potentially several contributors to pay disparity.
I think that is a huge contributor to pay disparity. And I saw one time where men compared negotiating for a salary to playing a game,
Mhm.
and women compared it to going to the dentist. Um,
Yeah.
and I fully agree
Mhm.
with that. I fit the stereotype there. I think I would rather go to the dentist than negotiate pay. And one of the things I loved about my jobs in corporate HR, whenever I've been in a corporate HR job, I've always been responsible for the HR people
Mhm.
within HR. So I had information on the salaries, bonuses, everything of
Yeah.
everybody, everybody. And so I always knew confidently
Yeah.
that I'm being paid fairly, because I could run a report and look at it. And in one job, I was responsible for the company-wide year-end salary increases, and I had to approve my boss's salary increase for the year end. I knew she was getting promoted before she did,
Yep.
which was great because we were able to throw a party for her. So actually, it turned out that all of her direct reports ended up knowing. I had permission from her boss to do that. I didn't just do it on my own. I did have permission from the head of HR to do that. But anyway, I always knew exactly that I was being paid fairly.
Yep.
And because I had all information. Now that I do this consulting side and this writing side and speaking, I mean, there's a huge range of fees that speakers get. A lot of places pay zero. And then if you want Ariana Huffington to come speak to you, it's $100,000. I
Yeah.
know, because I checked her website. Somewhere in the middle is me. I'm far closer to that zero edge than the Ariana Huffington, and I don't require you to pay for my private jet fuel either to get there. I don't know if she charges that either. I don't know what she charges according to her travel, but I never know when I'm asking. You know,
Mhm.
am I asking high? Am I asking low? Because it's this black box
Yeah.
going on. And I always think, well, is this something that's going to lead to something else? Should I be willing to do it for less? Should I hold out for more? And it's stressful. It's stressful. I would far rather than, say, here's our conference and we're going to pay keynote speakers this much, breakout session this much, and this much, and this, and so then I can look at the list and say, okay, yeah, I'm willing to do that, and know that the guy in the next room is making the exact same amount as I am.
Yep.
But I know that those numbers could be literally thousands
Yeah.
of dollars apart.
Yeah. See, and I'm just the opposite. I studied on how to negotiate. I used to be a horrible negotiator. I just used to be a horrible negotiator, period. Right. And just anything in life, And I got to a point where I said, you know what? I just took stock and inventory and I said, I know what I know and I'm good at what I do in these areas. And there's areas I'm not great at in HR. I mean, you can't be perfect in everything. It just doesn't work that way. But the things that I do have skills and talents on, and then, I had also got a level of coaching from somebody else who's a brand specialist, and she's like, you should be well known, well paid, and and well wanted. And to do that, you have to know your value, you have to know what that dollar sign is. And I started realizing, going back on, I had learned how to negotiate my salary just by going back and doing my homework. I would do my own comp analysis, and I was very realistic about what my capabilities are and were at every stage of my career. There are things that I knew I could do that was a reach. And it's like, okay, so if I wanted to be paid this amount and it was a little bit of a reach, I had to be very reasonable for that. So I made sure that I was very clear not to have that sense of entitlement when it came to the salary. I knew eventually what I wanted to make. And I also knew that I could fast track it so long as I continued to have open conversations, with my bosses and with, the decision makers. I just knew that there was a path forward. And in no time, I got to exactly where I wanted to be. And it just, just takes a little elbow grease, but it's about really keeping things real. And, again, I don't know a lot of people that put that much thought into, or women specifically that put that much thought and consideration into getting to the salary that they want. And the reason I say that is because I have women asking me, like, well, what should I ask for? And I'm like, well, what do you want? And they tell me, and I'm like, can you substantiate it? Like, if you want $120,000 a year salary, can you put it out? And like, get real with yourself on it. Because if you don't, you're going to find yourself wishing that you went lower because you couldn't meet 120, or you may even realize that your skills are higher than that. I mean, I don't know. It depends, and that's a very senior position for that kind of salary. But,
Well, I think it's important to do your homework. In some areas, it's hard to do your homework in, because people don't talk about it. And as I said, like with speaking, there are so many people that do it for free all of the time. And then there are so many people who are currently employed full time and their employers won't let them take a speaking fee. So there's all of those kind of things around it. But I think what you said about doing your research is really important.
yes.
And as part of doing your research, I think you also need to look at the trade-offs. And, the women's soccer team, they originally chose the trade-offs, the security.
Yeah.
And those things come at a cost. And this isn't just my theory. Harvard economics professor Claudia Goldman studied this and found that women strongly prefer flexibility over salary. And so she said, even if looking at lawyers that graduated from Ivy League law school, so, our top of the top, your Harvard Law, Yale Law people, women were far more likely to move into a general counsel position than to move into a law firm. And a lot of the reasons were because as a general counsel, you have better hours. There's not as much travel. There's not as many nights and weekends, and you make a lot of money. It's not that, these people these women with Harvard law degrees are practicing Burger King law. I mean, Burger King as a client would be great, but I mean, they're not making $10 an hour flipping burgers. Right. They're making $250,000 a year as a general counsel. Whereas if they had gone to the white shoe law firm, they could be making $2 million or $5 million a year, but they would be working 70-hour weeks. They would be coming in at the moment's notice because you've got to get what the client wants. Whereas if you're the general counsel, you are the client. Yes. If there's an emergency, you hire the outside law firm and you go to bed. And those are choices. They're choices that you make. And I look at my own life. I made very different choices than my husband made. We had identical degrees. Theoretically, we could have had identical jobs, but we both are political scientists by training, and we know that's a really great thing to study, kids. Bad major. I loved studying it, but you're not going to get rich. I studied, actually, my emphasis was political philosophy. That's marketable. Anyway, we both had a strong background in statistics, and I decided to go into human resources, and he decided to go into market research. And we both worked in pharma. We worked in the same industry. But because I had access to all of that data, I can tell you flat out, you're going to make more money when you focus on statistics than when you focus on HR. And did I have the skills 20 years ago to do the exact same thing that he was doing? Absolutely. Absolutely, I did. Do I have them anymore? No, because I haven't done statistics in probably 15 years.
Yeah, that's one of those things you have to go back and reevaluate.
Yeah. But I don't get to whine and complain now.
Right.
I made a decision because I liked working with people. I liked people.
Yeah.
I like numbers.
I am not a numbers fan. My 3s, my 6s, and my 8s all look the same.
Oh dear.
Not my favorite thing to deal with, but that's why I sometimes still rely on my toes. I have to. So, so back to the pay disparity thing. If we were to look at EEOC claims, equal opportunity claims, right? My
Sure.
guess is that another challenge and something that would need to be addressed to pay disparity as a whole is I don't think companies, the larger organizations that have a more, structured HR team, yes, absolutely. I don't think that this is as big of a problem. I don't know. I'd have to look at the numbers, but I think there's a good chunk of EEOC pay disparity claims to where the companies don't really review salary offers appropriately or merit increases. They're not doing their due diligence. They're not analyzing. They're not, comparing individuals of like positions to ensure that, they're not taking some form of adverse action against individuals.
Right.
And I think that's a big piece of it.
I think that's a huge piece of it. And I think that's also where negotiation skills come into play.
Right.
Because if you don't have someone that's reviewing all job offers and you say to a candidate, so what are you looking for? And she says, I would like 65,000. And you're like, yes, I budgeted 75, but she'll take 65.
Woo-hoo!
Awesome. Job is yours. And then you go pat yourself on the back and say, hey, I've made a good deal. But the problem is now she makes $10,000 less than her coworker does. And you can say, well, she should have asked for more. The courts are really moving away from that kind of a defense. That you should be paying based on what value and what the market rate is.
Yeah.
And so you really need somebody looking at those things and looking for especially internal equity.
Right.
If this is the only person in this position in the whole company, you can make a strong argument that, hey, she asked for this. This is exactly what we gave her. But when you start to have more than one person doing the same job or doing a similar jobs at the same level, you really, really need someone to look at it. And I really think, a lot of companies that I worked for, companies that you worked for, somebody went over those with a fine tooth comb. When we did salary increases at year end, when I worked in pharma, we got all of the managers' increases, all the recommendations, and then we ran the numbers. We looked at everything. We looked at it by age, race, gender, time and position, every possible variable we could think of, created charts, graphs, sent it to our legal department. And when we got the stamp of approval from the legal department, then we told the employees what their increases were. We didn't tell the employees what their increases were and then wait for somebody to complain and then look into it. You've got to look into it before.
Yeah. And that's, what you're talking about is working for a very complex infrastructure.
Right.
You're talking about, multiple location, multiple regions, multiple metropolitan areas, a lot of multiple employees going on there, multiple divisions, departments. That's a lot of analysis. And, that's something that's very common in a larger corporation. But when you look at, like, on my side of the fence, where I deal a lot with small business, they don't think that way. They don't even think to think that way.
Right.
It's a matter of sitting down and coming up with a matrix of some kind that says, okay, so if you have a lawn care company and all your lawn care people in this particular town, this is what they start at. This is boom, this is it. And if you have multiple locations across, the state or something like that, yeah, you can adjust that starting rate because of cost of living or, competitiveness or whatever, right? You can do that, but you have to be very consistent across the board. And if you just keep that mindset right there, then you're going to be fine. That way, if you give, if you have people that are working for you for more than 2 seasons, then yeah, you can give them a merit increase. But, if you're going to start attaching merit to performance, you better document it. And this is what kills me. And there's a lot of people right now out there in this world, mark my words, that are crying because they've had to do a reduction in force without documented annual reviews because supposedly they don't work. Well, they do work. They work so long as you work them.
This is why I love you, Brenda. Because I say the same thing. We need to disagree more so we can yell at each other or something.
Oh, I don't like yelling.
Jerry Springer style HR show.
Sorry.
No, because I agree 100% that most employee reviews are pretty worthless because managers are terrible at them. But what it gives you is a written record of performance,
yes,
a written record that you communicated any issues to the employee. The employee had the opportunity to see them. And then if you use a rating system, a number, something, say, you're a 5 or you're a 4.3 or whatever, then if it comes to layoffs, then you say, okay, we have 5 people in this position. We have 5 salespeople. Jane was a 4, Steve was a 3.9, Katie was a 4.5. You take the top people, and that's super defensible in court.
Yeah, it is. And all these companies are going through a riff without being able to do that now.
Yeah, and they think it's not important, and you read all of the things about how worthless performance reviews are. And if you had managers meeting regularly with their employees and regularly documenting and all of that, then maybe it's not so good. But most managers don't do that. An annual review gives you something to rely on.
Exactly.
And something that you can go and stand up in court. And that's something that every business owner and every HR manager needs to know, is that every one of their decisions, you have to be willing to sit on the stand, raise your right hand, and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth of this. That's what they really say. I've never actually been to court. But you have to be willing to do that.
Yep.
And if you can't back up your decisions, if you're making decisions based on gut feelings, or situations where you're like, well, Bob has a family that needs support, so we'll keep him, and we'll let Karen go because her husband has a good job. Oh boy, that's just, that's asking for it. And I've also noticed that some of these people tend to be willing to talk about it. Which
yes, they do.
They try to make Karen feel better. Karen, we're really sorry, we have to let you go, but we know that your husband has a good corporate job and that you guys will be okay. And we'd love to hire you back when the COVID thing ends, but right now we have to let you go.
Right.
And then she goes, oh, okay. Let me just
write that down.
I'll write that down. I'll document that.
That's right. I'll just give it. So, one of the, and I don't want to get into the weeds on performance reviews, but one of the, here's the thing. If you don't know how to write an effective performance review and tie it to merit, there's some tools that you can, I'm going to do 2 shameless plugs that have nothing to do with me, or either one of us actually, but you can actually get some of these very easy books like this one right here. Okay. Effective phrases for performance appraisals. And you can actually find really, really great lines that you can use and put inside of your annual review. Okay. That's really good feedback. And it's also something that you can use to help you build one. And again, protect yourself from the risks of pay disparity. You're actually creating it, and this is one of the main components. The other one, if you really want to get super super serious, there's this one. It's called the Career Architect Development Planner. This is a very comprehensive book. I actually bought this used. This is a very expensive book, but it is one of the best that is out there, and these are just two of the tools that people can use in order to do this. But again, it comes back down to, can you substantiate the salaries that you're compensating people, and will your people perceive that their compensation is fair and equitable as it pertains to their particular role and with their peers? Because employees talk. Holy cow, do they talk.
They do. And the National Labor Relations Act guarantees employees the rights to discuss their compensation, but managers often don't like it.
No, I
And
don't like it.
I just had a friend's daughter win a lawsuit, and she can't disclose to me how much she won because it's part of the non-disclosure. But she said, "I'm very happy with the outcome." That was her term. And I know what she was asking for, and it wasn't a little. Because she was fired for discussing her salary with her coworkers. And, this is 2020. I mean, this happened in 2019, but still the managers should have known. And this was a big enough company that there was on-site HR, and that person didn't step in and say anything. Or if she did, she was overridden. I don't know. Companies are still doing this. It's still illegal. You can still talk about it. And one of the things that I advocate for is a lot more openness and transparency in salary. I always say, if you freak out at the idea of someone accidentally leaving a list of employee salaries on the photocopier, then you need to evaluate your employee salaries. And of course, people are going to freak out. Hey, wait, why does the CEO make $350,000 a year while I'm making $10 an hour? That's something that you can easily explain. They may not like it, but you can explain it. What's hard to explain is, I've been here for 3 years and I'm making $10 an hour, and I've never had an employee, I've never had a complaint. I've always been on time. Bob just started last week and he's making 11.
Yeah.
That's something that you can't give a good explanation.
That's a problem. Yeah, I would be more concerned about not so much whether somebody was aware of the salary of individuals, including my own. I would be irritated by that, but it wouldn't bother me. What would bother me would be the fact that whoever left it on the copier, it was lack of control of confidential information and those things, you know what I mean? Because that would be, to me, it's like, all right, so what else are they doing that I don't know about? And how big of a problem do I really have? I mean,
sure.
Yeah, but I mean, that would be a bigger thing, but I wouldn't have, and I've run into this, I wouldn't have any type of grievance against somebody erroneously finding out what somebody else makes because of something like that. What I would be more uptight about is, okay, why did it happen? But because he can explain salaries.
And we should be able to.
Easily.
Absolutely. And I remember a point where I had a direct report who was paid extremely fairly. Actually, she was on the high side of fair. And she believed she wasn't making enough. And because of the nature of our job, she had access to everybody's salary too. And I finally said to her, look, your salary is fair. It's on the high side of fair. I can't do anything more for you. You go out, you try to find a new job making more. And she did, and she could not. And she never asked about it again.
Yeah.
This was a situation where she had the same information that I did. She knew what all of her coworkers were making because of the nature of our jobs. And she wasn't the highest paid amongst her peers.
Yep.
Because she wasn't as good as them. And I was able to explain that. And I was able to show, look, performance ratings, you know all of this, and finally, okay, you go out, you find a job that will pay this much,
Yep.
and I'll pat you on the back. And she tried and she couldn't because our salaries were beyond fair.
Yeah.
Um, that's the nice thing about pharma, they do pay very well.
And that goes back to substantiating. It's like, if you, like I said, if you want $120,000 salary, can you, I mean, are you capable of earning that?
Right.
You know,
And earning is the key word there.
Yes, yes. And
You have to earn it. And that's one of the things that I don't like when people are like, this fight for 15. What are you doing to earn that much money for the business? Because frankly, I've met some people that can't bring in 15.
no, let me tell you something. I got asked to speak at Old Dominion University uh, last fall, and it was a class on unionization. And so I told them, I said, I know about unions. I like know it on the high level, but I've never like really got into this. She goes, that's all right, don't worry about it. I just want you to come and talk. So I did. So what was supposed to be a 20-minute conversation turned into a like 2-hour discussion about a lot of things involving HR. And I have something in my eye and it's driving me nuts. Sorry. But what was interesting is that when we got into salary negotiation, because some of the students are like, well, you know, what kind of salary should I ask for, and blah, 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 blah. I came up with the questions like, so let me ask you guys, what do you think about, you know, the states that are trying to move employees to $15 an hour? Oh my God, the whole class completely erupted. And so, are you kidding me? Like, you walk into McDonald's and you order off of a kiosk. What the hell is going to get food and bringing it to a counter? What is so big about that? I mean, it's like the whole class went off. They said that is a minimum wage job, and it was really refreshing to hear a group of young students, all the way from literally freshmen all the way to graduating seniors, all agree that $15 an hour is ridiculous in their eyes. It was really, really refreshing.
That's really good to hear, because you have to bring back to the table, you have to bring this value to the company. And sometimes companies talk about profit centers versus cost centers. And, you know, HR is always a cost center. But if you can look at what good HR brings, I mean, I can argue it's profit center. You know, if I can implement policies and procedures that reduce your turnover, that increase your ability to recruit people, that make your employees more productive because they're having a good employee experience, you're going to get a tenfold return on your investment in your salary on me.
Right.
That's something that is helping you save money. If I can just keep you from getting a lawsuit filed against you, you know, one of the things that I have said so many times when I've had employees say to me, well, I'm going to go talk to my lawyer. And I always say, I think that's a really great idea. And they're always like, what? And I'm like, absolutely. Here's their paperwork. Take this to your attorney and get back to me. And do you know how many ever get back? That's right. Not one. Yeah. Because suddenly I've taken the wind out of their sails. And I don't know how many actually go to an attorney, but we dotted all our I's, crossed all our T's. Yeah. You know, we had no fear of that. I mean, somebody's always going to find the sleazy attorney who's willing to take the case, and it's going to cost you a bunch of money to get it thrown out. But if you're solid, you're saving the company so much money. So much money.
Yes, I would agree. I would agree. And you know, and it is a legal right of individuals. I mean, they can go and converse with their attorney and they can get a second opinion. And you know what? There are people out there that do that. I mean, I've done it for a couple of things, right? Because I just didn't think that what was coming my way didn't sound right. And what a lot of it came down to was a lack of clear explanation. and, making sure that what they were trying to convey, I understood. And then, once I talked to my attorney about it, and they said, more than likely, this is what they're trying to tell you. And then I sat with them and I said, all right, so I'm a little confused. Are you trying to say, like, what are you trying to say exactly? And I had them break it down. Sure enough, it was. And, even though that cost me time and money, to me, in my opinion, it was still a good phone call to make.
Oh,
Because
absolutely it is. And, when I encourage people to go to their attorneys, I, as I said, I have no fear of that. It's also is your right. And there are some areas of employment law that are totally gray. Totally gray.
there's quite a few of them.
And especially right now we were going to stay away from COVID things, but with these new legislations with the EFMLA and even the payroll protection program and all of that, there's so much gray. There's so much gray. And you can go to an attorney and talk to them, and it's worth the money. And that's the other thing I tell companies as well, that it is far better for you to spend $250 to call and ask your employment attorney a question than to wait until you get sued and then pay that same employment attorney $50,000 to defend you in court.
Yeah, and then the $250 turns into a $250,000 case as a whole.
Yeah, it's so much better. But we have gone away from our topic of.
Now we're still on it. We're still on it. But these are the things. These are the multifacets of pay disparity. I mean, we've talked about the ability for people to talk to their attorney if they think that they're, against the pay disparity. What the connection is between performance reviews and pay. And these are all important things. I mean, this is what the mainstream media misses out on. They've poo-pooed the things that are in place in order for pay disparity to not exist. And then they keep bringing it up in the flash in the pan. And like I said, there are companies that they don't ignore it. And you said a call out during our meeting is that they just pull their salaries out of a hat, and I love that. Right. But at the same time, I don't think it really truly exists as much as the media says it is. Because when you look at the annual EEOC reports and claims, it's not nearly as high as retaliation and harassment claims.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And then some companies, even when they have had complaints, Google is one of them, and they ran their numbers, it turned out that women were making more than men in the same positions, but there's the perception that I'm a woman and therefore I'm underpaid. And that's not the case. It's sometimes the case. I mean, does discrimination exist? Yes, it does.
Sure it does.
Are there horrible people out there?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yes, there are.
Oh, hell yeah.
Have we met some of them? Yes. But in most cases, people are trying to be fair. Sometimes they're dumb about it. But as we said, you're probably going to find more fairness in a bigger company that has these watchdog things in place to look at every salary, to run that data regularly. And as I said, when I worked in pharma, I spent 3 of my years in pharma being in charge of the HR data. We ran that data. We had monthly reports. There was nothing getting by us.
Yep.
Nothing. And any error was corrected as fast as possible.
Yeah.
They're not going to, it's because they've sat down and they've run the numbers, and paying somebody $5,000 less is not a savings.
Yep.
It's not.
I remember one time I did an analysis on, and this is when I worked for a large company. I won't say which one it is, but I worked for a large company, and individuals that had different levels. It was only for a specific group of people, and it was on the sales side. And and look, there's a lot of companies that do this. Is that when you've got in sales, there's multiple levels of like commission, right? If you make X number of dollars, then you get this as part of your spiffs, your bonuses, and then your commission rate. That's very standard. And I ran an analysis and I discovered that $100,000 payroll error in over 3 years.
Oops.
Yeah. That's a big deal. I mean, it was a larger company and the pain of that wasn't felt, but it was pretty impressive when all of a sudden the supporting leadership said, how are we going to do this? Because it was that company's policy to fix all payroll errors. How do you go back 3 years to tell somebody that they've been overpaid because their managers botched it up? How do you do that? It wasn't easy.
Ooh.
And we had to make some pretty serious decisions and have some very serious conversations with everybody, because that was the company's policy, was to fix payroll errors. If it's wrong, it's going to get righted. And it doesn't always work in the employee's favor. And majority of the people it did, because they were not paid appropriately. But the ones that were overcompensated, to be able to go back 3 years and say, hey, listen, we discovered, that means that they have to amend their taxes. You have to amend their W-2s. You're taking money away because you're buying it back. There's some big crap right there. That's a big old heaping pile of that you want to deal with. But so we're coming up on the end of our hour and we just have a few minutes left. So this has been awesome. Is there any 1 minute last input that you want to throw out there that you can think of?
On this, no, but if you want to comment further, I just posted a post on my blog evilhrlady.org about this women's national soccer team ruling. So you're free to do there, or you can come to my Evil HR Lady Facebook group where we will be discussing it there. We discuss things nicely there. No bad words, but any opinion is welcome as long as you're nice with your opinion.
That's awesome. So where can people find you if they want to look you up?
They can come to my blog, evilhrlady.org, or Google Evil HR Lady. I'll show up, or join our Facebook group, which is called Evil HR Lady.
There you go.
Where do we find you, Brenda?
And you're on Twitter too.
I'm on Twitter, real Evil HR Lady on Twitter, as compared to the fake one.
So you can find me in a couple of spots too. So you can find me first and foremost on the website at bestpractices.org. I'm on LinkedIn, Brenda Neckbottom. The spelling of my name is right here because nobody gets it right, and that's fine. You can also find me on the Best Practices in Human Resource podcast. And our website together is therealhrshow.com. So if you want to connect with both of us, you can actually go to therealhrshow.com and click on our respective links, and you can pop on over. And this has been yet another awesome Tuesday with you.
It is an awesome Tuesday. It's so fun. It makes my week.
Aw, yeah, it does. This is a lot. I enjoy it. I mean, it's like, I know it's nice to have somebody who agrees with you instead of having to battle upward and onward. And you know what? I'm going to do one more shameless plug that if you guys are looking for a place to go, we're both in it. January, I started a group called the Next Gen Women in HR. It's a predominantly feminine-driven industry, but you know what? We've got great conversation, great tools, great resources, and a lot of really other great things coming down the line. So you got 2 groups that you can join in. You can join in. I'm gonna jump in. I didn't even know you had it, so I'm gonna jump in and do that. And we are in it. And then by the end of the day, we'll be in each other's respective groups and and it's all about really great conversation and how to support one another and not have that feeling of isolation. So
yeah, both very supportive groups.
Awesome.
So.
Very good.
All right, I guess we're done and we got to say goodbye.
Until next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
Same bat time, same bat channel. We'll talk to you later.
All right, bye.
Bye.